This is the Arctic BioniX P120 ARGB fan. Let's jump right into the graphs and see how good this fan really is. Okay, before we get into the actual graphs for the data for the BioniX P120 ARGB, just some notes about it. It's a 30mm fan, so it is extra thick, which is good for pressure optimization, which hopefully we'll find. It's got a fluid dynamic bearing, 12 volt, 1.3 amp, 400 to 2300 RPM. Airflow is rated at 48 CFM, static pressure at 2.1, noise level at 16.5 decibels, and it's got a 6-year warranty. Alright, first up is my airflow testing. So in this type of test, I have a case simulation. It fits up to a 180mm size fan, and there are two main specific ways of taking a look at this data. The first way is at a specific size case category for sort of what kind of performance you need in that case, and the other way to look at it is how good is the fan at actually pushing air a long distance from the fan. So I did the measurements at 4 different data points: 6 inches, 9 inches, 11 inches, and 14.5 inches. And each of the data points are representative of a different size case. So 6 inches is a very small form factor pressure, a case that needs high pressure type applications. A 9 inch is more like a standard layout but small form factor type case. 11 inches is going to be like a mid tower, so Corsair 550D, Meshify 2C, I believe, something like that, while the 14.5 inches represents a large case, something along the lines of a Fractal Design Torrent, the full-size tower one. So in an ideal world, a perfect fan would lose no performance as you got farther away from it, meaning as you took your measurement farther away from it. But we don't live in that kind of super idealistic world, basically, where you're going to see losses in performance. So you want to see that loss as little as possible and as linear as possible. You don't want to see a steep drop in performance. A steep drop is indicative of a fan that just spews air in every direction and it loses performance like nobody's business. So meaning that fan is just not good in a airflow type application. One that keeps it nice and concentrated and a flat line is one that you want for a case fan that'll push air through your entire case. And then part 2 of it is, what sort of application are you using this fan for in your case? So for example, the Fractal Design Torrent and the Torrent series allows you to put fans underneath your GPU. Well, it's only shooting 6 inches. So how much performance do you need? You can pick a high-performing fan that, even though it will have great losses later on, shoots air everywhere, it's still going to get enough air into your basically GPU fans to keep your GPU nice and cool. But if you're using an air cooler and it's on the other side of the case and you're losing a lot of performance and it goes down to 0 basically, then it's not a good choice for your case to keep it cool. Now that we have that sort of explanation, well, how does it compare to something else? In my fan testing, I have a standardized case fan, which is my control, this blue line. The blue line is part 1 or 3 parts Noctua A12X25 to 1 part Noctua A14. The larger 140mm fans tend to do better in airflow testing in a case type environment because it's a larger fan, so it's better able to fill the volume of a case and push the air to the back, while 120 is going to have a much harder time, and as you get to smaller fans, they're really not going to be as good at pushing air through a large volume. So that's what my control is, and this is for noise normalized testing. It is at my 40 decibel reading, and that 40 decibel reading is based off of the A12X25 at around 1,200-ish RPM, and that's the RPM I had it in my old AIO, and I found it to be a particularly silent RPM to run the fans at while still offering great performance. In future upcoming videos, I've revamped my whole testing methodology for how I'm going to be noise testing fans in the future, so stay tuned for that, and it's in the hopes of making things more accurate. But anyways, on to this. So I have the BioniX ARGB, which is the red line, and I have the P12 ARGB here in the green line. So they're both RGB fans so that they can be directly compared. And we can basically see that they start off very similar. So that 6-inch mark. So blowing air into your GPU or in a very small case, they would do about equally as well, but they are underperforming compared to my control fan. Now that being said, they have similar trend lines, but in general, the P120 BioniX is underperforming the P12. Because 100% PWM full speed fans matters a bit less for case airflow, you really shouldn't be running your case fans at 100% RPM. Something is probably overheating terribly if the fans are running at 100% PWM signaling. So I didn't include the other fan for this graph, but you can see that at 100% RPMs, ignoring sound, I didn't set a sound for my control. That'll be in how it compares to other fans will be in a later graph. But it almost matches my control fan. So it is a high performing fan. It's just noisy. Now on to how it compares against everything else. So right here, this is the Gentle Typhoon. It just blows everybody else out of the water to the point that it's essentially off the graph. So I really wanted to be able to zoom in to where we were actually looking. So that's why I didn't zoom it out to show its total performance. So where does that leave us? There's the BioniX P120 ARGB. It is right here towards the bottom. You might be asking, what else is underneath it? Well, the Noctua NF-S12B is down here with it. Right here, this sort of purplish blue line, is the BioniX P120 non-RGB version. They are subtly different. The ARGB one is thicker in depth. It is a thicker fan. The P12 is right here, outperforming it. And the P12 Max is up here. And we have the Noctua A12X25. Actually, this one's the Wonder Snail. The A12X25 is this red line, followed by the Simonlynx 4 Pro, which is also this red line. So really the Wonder Snail is actually a very high performer there as well. Now on this graph, we've moved on to 100% PWM fan signaling. Over on this side, on the legend, we have the RPM the fan was running at, and the noise level. So that way you have the noise data if you want it, if you care about it a lot. So right here, the P12 ARGB had a 60 decibel noise reading. It is noisy, but it's also in kind of the middle of the pack. It does drop down a little bit later on, but overall it's not doing that bad. The blue line is the P12 ARGB. Right here, what's this green one? That's the Wonder Snail. It's doing quite well. The P12 Max is right up here, doing really well. The Simonlynx 4 Pro is right there. So it gives you a good idea with the mix. So the P12, the BioniX P120, sorry, it's not the easiest name, ARGB one, is kind of in the lower mix. It's not a terrible position, but it's okay. Next, we're still looking at the case airflow, and this is the 9-inch mark airspeed versus decibels. The 9-inch mark, I found in most of my testing, is where the fans tend to transition from being more or less good case fans to being bad case fans. Some of them it's the 11-inch mark, some it's the 9-inch mark, but on average the 9-inch mark. So it's kind of that good one where the fans that are terrible at case airflow haven't completely lost everything, and the fans that are good at case airflow that maybe didn't perform as well at the beginning are don't completely overwhelm the ones that blow air in every direction. So it's kind of this middle ground between small and big cases. So right off the bat, we have the Gentle Typhoon. It's kicking butt. And we have the BioniX P120 ARGB is this green line right here. It is doing okay, but it is at the bottom of the graph. Better fans are over here. So less noise, better performance. More noise, worse performance. That way. So the BioniX, just not that great. The In general, I found the Arctic series of fans just a little bit on the noisy side. But again, I'm revamping my whole testing methodology. It's just going to take some time for the videos to publish out for it. And for me to finish all the testing, because I have to redo all these fans. Arctic BioniX ARGB. Okay, next up we have RPM versus airspeed through my CPU cooler, the U12A, and noise versus airspeed through the same cooler. So good fans are once again over here, higher airspeed, less noise. And over here we have RPM versus airspeed, and again, better fans are sitting over here. So it means you need less fan RPM to get good airflow through it. So this is where I found Arctic fans tend to do really well, is they're well-designed blades. So if you're into like the fan showdown, this is what you'd really be looking at. How much performance can I get in a fan design to get the maximum amount of performance? Because in that he doesn't do any noise. Well, he does do noise testing, but it's not a criteria. While over here, how can I make my fan as silent as possible for a given airflow? So jumping back to the RPM, both fans, the P12 ARGB and the BioniX P120 ARGB, follow my control very closely, indicating that they are well-designed fan blades. However, in the noise performance mark, they're just not doing quite as well. Now, how do these fans compare to other fans? Well, first up is noise normalized. Again, it's my standard 40 decibel mark. Some other key things on this graph is this piece of information. This is a wattage for an airspeed for my specific air cooler, for my specific CPU. Even if you have the same CPU as me, you may get slightly different results. I have the 11700K from Intel. And again, my cooler is the U12A. So I did a whole series of testing on my channel for testing how much performance I could get out of my air cooler at a given air velocity coming through it. And I equated that to different wattages and basically created nice pretty graphs and curves and everything like that. If you have a different CPU cooler than me, whether it's a radiator or an AIO or some other heatsink strapped to your computer, if you are buying a fan, let's say like the NF-F12 or even the Arctic P12, and you jump up to, I don't know, the Mobius OC, the Gentle Typhoon, the Silence 4 Pro, you're going to get better performance in general for the same noise level. Now, there is a point of diminishing returns for how much air you can push through a radiator, heatsink, what have you, before you see less and less performance gain. So at some point, you can just dial it. You won't be able to get more performance out of it at your airspeed. I already said that. But it also allows you to turn back the dial on it and get the same level of performance for a quieter fan. So you get less noise in your case for the same amount of performance. So that's how you could use this if you have a different heatsink radiator CPU cooler than me. Now all of that explanation is out of the way. How does the BioniX X P120 compare to other fans in its category? Well, it's kind of bottom middle of the road. It's better than the P12. I don't know why the label isn't there. But this is the P12 regular, this is the ARGB one, and this is the BioniX X P120 ARGB. This is a good time for me to note the error in my data collection. For noise testing, I have an error in this testing methodology of about 4 decibels. That's actually a fairly large swing because every 10 decibels is a doubling in noise volume. I had placed my microphone, which is just what I'm using to record on right now, right next to the fan blade and picked it up because I'm in a relatively noisy environment. Future testing, I've completely revamped this testing and it may shake up. I have no idea where these fans are going to lie. It may shake up how these fans rank. I'm also looking for support for my Patreon channel. I greatly appreciate anybody who would like to help support me, because it would go directly into buying new test equipment. There's a $200+ microphone that is designed for this sort of application that is just kind of outside my budget for a YouTube channel that is basically negative income. So I thank you if you subscribe to my Patreon channel. I'll keep doing what I'm doing, and well, let's keep taking a look at these graphs. I think we talked about everything for this noise normalized. Jumping on to 100% PWM fan signaling. In this graph, you're going to notice that we have the RPM and we have the noise level behind each one. So again, you can compare everything yourself. My CPU seems to top out at 250 watts, so note that these fans may be pushing faster than 3 meters per second, but that doesn't mean I would actually get more performance out of it, because again, back to that diminishing returns thing I was talking about. So higher fin density gives you more leeway for like absorbing heat, as opposed to a less dense fin stack where higher airflow through it is actually you're going to see less results. So do keep all of that in mind. So how does the BioniX P120 ARGB version rank compared to everything else? Well, it is right next to the Gentle Typhoon, although it is much noisier. Compared to the BioniX X regular edition, it is quite a bit more performant. The margin of error in airspeed is plus or minus decimal point 1 meter per second. So it is outside my margin of error. The Wonder Snail is just within margin of error of these two fans. So that gives you some idea of how things are shaking up. And the Ventro Pro and Gentle Typhoon are fundamentally the exact same fan, but notice they've got slightly different performance values. So this is margin of error and kind of retesting averages. That's where we get a little bit of this sort of fluctuation in the data. All that said, the BioniX X is kind of a middle-of-the-roads performer. It is slightly outperforming currently the A12X25, but it is quite a bit noisier. It is spinning at a faster RPM though, so that kind of makes sense. As we move up, it is completely no match for 3000 RPM T30, the F12 3000 IPC, and the P12 Max, but also, you know, 60 decibels, 60 decibels, 69 decibels, 60 decibels. You have a much noisier experience. Looking at things from a slightly different perspective, where we're now taking a look at airspeed through the cooler versus decibels. So this way we get all the airspeed measurements at different decibel readings, and allows you to basically see what fans are of interest to you. And first up, here's the BioniX P120 ARGB. It is sitting at the bottom. So better fans, again, are kind of over in this direction. So it's okay, but it's not that great. While the P12 is this orange line, so the BioniX P120 is better than the regular P12. But they're completely no match for the Mobius OC, 120 OC, and the Gentle Typhoon. But if you need absolute maximum raw performance, you're going to have to give up noise. So it's how much noise do you want to give up? So the purple line is the P12 Max, and this blue line is the T30. So that gives you some other perspective here. Next, we're taking a look at CFM. So RPM versus CFM and noise versus CFM. CFM is sort of this mixed valid test for me. So it basically is fundamentally looking at, well, how much air can the fan blow for a given volume? So that's what CFM is, cubic feet per minute. So it's a volume. It's basically very scientific. You put the fan at the end of the tube, you have the fan blow air down the tube, and you have an anemometer at the end of it taking a measurement of how much air it's reading. So even if the fan spews air in every direction, not the sides, the majority of the air is still going to be pushed down the middle properly. But if it's shooting off to the sides, then overall its average air velocity is going to be a little bit lower, so you do see differences that way. But it hides a lot of the differences between fans than doing that case airflow test. I did forget to mention it until, well, just right now. For fans that do blow air in kind of every direction, spreading out in that wide path, that matters a lot less for radiators and heat sinks. Personally, I do want one that has a nice concentrated airflow, but in general it matters less because you're hooking up to a radiator and one that has a particularly tight fin stack. The air is going to back up against the fan and then be pushed as a giant column anyways. Even though it's being pushed out to the side, it'll still have a pressure seal around it, so everything will be nice and tight and basically going all the same direction, similar to actually how a CFM test is performed. But a lot of other channels do the CFM test without doing a case airflow test, which I think is kind of missing the point. It doesn't give you everything you need to make the best decision on what is the best fan for you. So, now that I've said all of that, how does the BioniX P120 ARGB do? Well, in terms of blade design, it is right up there with my control fan. It's slightly underperforming at higher RPMs, but it's still a very good position. In terms of noise, it's once again lower. So no real surprises there. But how does it rank overall against all the other fans? Well, my control on this graph is right here, just for sake of reference, and the P120 ARGB is sitting right there at noise normalized values of 31.9 meters or cubic feet per minute of airflow. So it is the top of the weaker fans. So the P12, the TLC12 Pro, the TLG12, all those ones are down here. And then I include like the T30, the EK Loop fan, the P12 Max. All these are well at the top. At 100% PWM fan signaling, how does it rank? Well, it's still in the middle. It's gained a lot of ground, but it's still a very noisy fan. It's near the Tough Fan 12 Turbo. Actually, they've got the same scores. So it's doing okay. And the A12 X25 is slightly under it, but it's got much better noise value. So you need to pick and choose what is the most important aspect for your fans. Let's go ahead and jump to our open box experience, and then we'll do our value proposition. I'm sorry, I lied. We're going to check out CFM versus decibels. We'll talk about it really quickly. BioniX X is right here, same trend, right at the bottom. And right here is the Gentle Typhoon. So it's missing the top legs and the bottom legs, but it's doing nicely in the middle. Everything else is basically fundamentally the same. Now we're going to do our open box and then jump to our value proposition. Okay, we just finished taking a look at the graphs. Let's go ahead and do our open box experience. So it comes in this box, which actually looks pretty nice. It's got a 2-year limited warranty. It's covered, but it works with pretty much every RGB type software. On the back, they talk about the frame and the RGB technology, the airflow technology, but it's overall stuff that is pretty easy to look up. In the box, we get another box. And what else is in there? Some information cards. Woohoo! Alright, let's check out what's in this. We got the extension cable so that you can string the fans together. We got some screws, and we got another one of those extension cables. So the way that these fans plug in is it's got this proprietary header, and you just sort of align it up and push it into place. I'm a little off to the side right now, hang on. So this custom header I think is fine. I question how tight you can get the fans together, because you would want it so that they're all stringed together and gonna hide it. So if you have a connector and a connector, you can't hide it. So I do question its placement and how they're going to daisy chain. But since I only have one example to deal with, I can't fully comment on that aspect of it. So, but I just want to bring it to your attention, and it's got the two cables, the RGB one and the standard power connector. So let's talk about the frame real quick. The frame on it is actually pretty interesting. It is basically a standard box frame, except it's got this nicely incorporated with the ring, so that the fan blade is as large as possible while still giving it a nice RGB LED effect. The hub in the middle is on the smaller side, kind of like the standard P or P BioniX P, whatever. But overall, the frame design is very different. This is a much more pressure optimized frame, and that's also apparent based on the fan's extra thickness, as this is a 30mm thick fan as opposed to a standard 25, which should help in pressure applications, assuming they added some extra thickness radius to the blades themselves. While we're on the topic of performance, I found that this to be relatively quiet, though it did create some noise in a pull configuration. But again, you wouldn't use it in a pull configuration because it would cover up the LED lights. And in its performance characteristics, I found it to be overall a poor performer in noise normalized testing in case airflow. However, at 100% PWM signaling, it performed well, but you do produce quite a bit of noise. In terms of heatsink, so pressure applications, it was okay in the noise department, while performance per RPM was excellent. So Arctic once again is proving that they make a very good blade design, but their motors and potentially the blade design is just noisy. So it's just something that they could work on in the future if they wanted to. But for the performance you're getting for the price, this is truly excellent. Real quick, it looks like the inside of the screw holes is a little bit rubbery, but it's not particularly good, I would say. And the struts are nice and thin so that they won't obstruct airflow. Now let's take a look at the fan blade. So I brought out a regular P12 BioniX, and right away you can see that they are different thicknesses. And second, you can see that the RGB version has a smaller blade, which is part of the reason why it's not as good at airflow. Just a smaller blade means it's not going to push as much air, even if it will do the same sort of pressure application. As a matter of fact, it might do a little better in a pressure application. So on a radiator, the blade size doesn't matter quite as much because the air is going to stall partially behind the fan. So you're trying to overcome that stall. So you're just using that air to push its way through it. So it'll fill the space that it's stalled wherever the fan is sitting on top of, and then it'll shove all that air through it. So really what you need is the good box frame to make that nice seal so that the air will travel through basically that surface. While in a heatsink, like on a standard air cooler, you need the larger blades to push more air volume through it because it's not backing up the pressure nearly as much. So that part is very important. It depends on how you're using these fans and what application as to which one is more important. But taking a close look at the blade design, they are fundamentally very similar. Just these are squashed inward a little bit, and it's a standard type fan blade that we see on a lot of Arctic fans, where it's a hybrid architecture between pressure optimization and airflow, where I have this nice arc cup effect that scoops the air and shoves it out the back. So it potentially could do well per RPM in airflow testing in comparison to another RGB fan with a similar basically blade shrinkage size. But that doesn't take away the fact that it isn't as good as a standard fan. It accelerates air out the back. It's got a nice little cup shape to it. I don't know what else to say about it right now, but it's fairly unremarkable in terms of its being smooth. It's just got a nice curvature and that hybrid design and produces airflow. Let's take a look at the RGB. All right, now we're taking a look at the ARGB of this fan, the BioniX X, and I have it in one color so that we can see the individual RGB lights. 1, 2. There appear to be 12 in total, which allow for good color blending effect, which I'm going to turn on right now, just letting it run through the halo ring of different colors. So you can see right in between, there's a good blending of colors, and you get better blending of colors with more RGB lights. So this one creates a nice halo ring, which I think is giving a pretty good appearance overall in this one, where it appears to shine straight through the fan, illuminating kind of all of it and a little bit into the back, but not overall very much. So you really want to place this fan in a forward-facing position as opposed to behind anything, so I wouldn't use it in a pull configuration. This would be a push configuration only fan. And for that, I think creates a very nice like depth of field effect. The lighting, the lights appear to be pretty good. We're going to do a quick comparison. I'm going to turn it back to a steady state. And it's a different color than my RAM. And how about, well, pretty similar in color to the RGB strip at the top of the case. So I guess overall that's fine. I'm finding that I wish that a lot of these companies would just use the same LED lights so they would all be consistent colors, but I'm not an expert on RGB lights, so I'm going to just leave it up to you as to whether the lighting is good or not. I do think it looks pretty good. My favorite, I think, is still the Squama. It's just a nice, tight, fine LED detail. This one is probably ranked among the better ones that I've taken a look at. I guess I really like the way the Arctic ones look because I also like the P120 ARGB appearance as well. Alright, I don't think I have anything more to say about the RGB. Let's jump into the value proposition section. Alright, we finished our open box experience. Let's now go over the value proposition of this fan. So whether or not you like the way its RGB looks has no effect on the value proposition. Value proposition is simply a fundamental calculation of how good is the performance versus how much money did you spend on the fan. First, a disclaimer. I bought this fan and most of the fans as a single fan. So if it's in a triple pack, you can save money, but I did them all individually. So depending on how the triple pack is priced, the graphs do change. So how much did this fan cost? Well, it was 22 bucks. So because of that fundamentally higher price, it makes its performance value, especially as a case fan, really not that compelling. So you can see right here, it's just over 0.5, and it is well behind the majority of the other fans. Like the TLG12 is just kicking butt. So I also wanted to say right here how to use these graphs. So if money is no question for you, you can completely ignore this data altogether. You can skip this section. But if you're on the tightest of budgets altogether, like super tight, you've got no extra money to spend, you want to be looking at this data the most closely because you want the best bang for your buck. Well, if you are somewhere in between, you've got a little bit of extra money, or you want to spend a little bit of extra money to get something a little bit nicer, you want to weigh this data with my standard performance data so that then you can find your middle ground of what you're willing to spend and get the best fan in that kind of category. So that being said, now that that's said, the P120 at the 100% is still, it's jumped into the middle of the pack, but we're also ignoring noise values. So it's okay. The TLG12 is still ranked really well. The P12 Max is kicking butt. It's doing quite well over here too. So that indicates that it's a good choice as well. Jumping up to an 11-inch mark. So right here is where basically the fans that are bad at case airflow will drop away, while fans that are good at case airflow will tend to rise up because we've moved them that 6-inch to an 11-inch mark. So the P120 ARGB really is at the bottom of the pack. The TLG12, while not being the best fan for case airflow, it is such a good value. It is such a cheap fan. I have a full video on it on my channel, so you may want to check it out. But that's why it ranks so well. The P12 Max is also ranked really well in this category. Moving up to CPU coolers, noise or value proposition, the P120 ARGB is kind of bottom of the pack still. 0.4, so airspeed versus dollars, it's just not doing that great. Even at 100% fan signaling, it's still, I'd call it the middle, but it's not that great, unfortunately. I do think the RGB in it is very pretty though. And last, but certainly not least, is CFM, cubic feet per minute. So this is the more scientific of the tests. And it's basically the middle, and basically over here, kind of the middle. So it's okay overall. And that's our show. I want to thank you all for watching this video about the BioniX P ARGB. If you're looking for more fan videos, there's lots more on my channel. And if you want to see any particular fans, please just put a comment down below in the comment section of the video so I know what fans to take a look at in the future. If you have any advice on how to improve the video, I appreciate constructive feedback. Otherwise, have a great day. Check out my Patreon page, subscribe for more content, and I'll see you next time. And right here is the raw data for the BioniX P120 ARGB. You're welcome to use this data for your own purposes. You can make your own Excel spreadsheets. You can, I don't know, if you do decide to publish it in media, whether it's a website or a video, I do ask that you reference me as the person that created this data, because I spent like an hour and a half just collecting data, and then it takes another 40 minutes to an hour to update the graphs and make them nice and eliminate extra fans so that I can present it, and then another hour just to make the PowerPoint and then another pretty much hour to film everything. So it takes a lot of time. I have a very manual process right now because it's just me. So I thank you for that if you do use it and you reference me as the data collector. Other than that, thank you very much for watching. Have a good day. I'll see you next time here on Computer Tech and More.